And welcome back to the Hermes task group. So this is part 3 of 3 for the combat flight introduction. In the previous two videos we've just gone through the basic setup and kind of configured our areas ready for the actual mission planning, so the meat that goes on the bones here. So what we're going to do on this one is we're going to make sure that we've set up all our waypoints, our push points, IP, check our targets, and then we're just going to focus on the flight legs to make sure that they're all configured correctly. So let's jump straight in. So since the last video, you'll see there's a little bit more going on right now. So the first thing you'll notice is there's a few red dots here. So I've thrown in a couple of mark points or reference points designated as other, and they are just obvious points that may be useful during the planning stages. So I've added one or two for the valley. There's one up for this plain out here in the south of Georgia. And then a couple out here in the AO. So that's the first thing that we've done. The other thing that we've done is we've added a second package. So the package is supporting, and you'll see here there's actually two flights on here. We've got Overlord and we've got Texaco. So obviously there are AWACS and there are Tanker. And what I'm going to do really quickly here, just to show you, is we know in the case of Overlord that they're going to be on a frequency of 228 megahertz for pretty much the whole flight. So what we're going to do here is add 228. Now, just be aware, if you're going to change frequencies at any point during the mission, you can if you want. So for example, we're currently on waypoint 0, i.e. takeoff. We can select, say, waypoint 2, we're going to push to a different frequency. So it's a level of detail we don't necessarily need, but it's there should you need it. The other thing that we're going to do with Texaco, I'm going to make sure waypoint 0, we know Texaco is on 227, so we're going to set that. And the other thing that we know about Texaco is that it's on 43 X-ray for its TACAN, so let's set those and then add them. Haven't gone into too much detail with these ones, and they're going to be hidden for most of the planning stages, but they're just on there, and we may use them later on. So here we go. Before we start drawing our flight plan out, let's have a look at the AO and figure out what we're going to do here. So we know this is going to be a low-level training exercise, and we've got a forward line of own troops here. Now, ideally, we always want to cross this perpendicular to the line of the flop. Why do we do that? If we're flying along it, then there's a good chance that some nervous triggers are going to get pointed in our direction, and it's going to ruin our day. And that could be on either side. So let's try and spend as little time as possible crossing it in and out of the AO. So we're going to be coming in this rough direction, we think, and then we'll probably want to egress back out. So I want to set myself an IP, and I'm going to put that IP over this really big obvious feature here. So this IP is going to be on the lake, and that gives us roughly 10 miles to target, which is going to be plenty of time to do our final checks, make sure we're fenced in. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a push point. Now, while not strictly necessary here, it is useful to get in the habit of doing this because there's some functionality in CombatFlite that kind of rely on these particular waypoint types. So my push point is going to be at the foot of this valley here at Baghdadi, and what we'll do is we'll actually name this one Baghdadi. I'm just sticking to the 5-letter convention for nav fixes. You don't need to do that. You can call them whatever you want. And then I'm also going to set an exit point. So the push point really for me is like the time in which the flight's going to be vulnerable. So we know we're pretty safe in the valleys up until this point, but we want to cross in northeast. So this is pretty exposed here. So that's going to be our push point. And our exit point will be somewhere where we're relatively safe on the outbound. So we know this is the threat area. We're going to be coming in for our IP to the target area. We're not going to want to come back out the way we came for obvious reasons, but there's some good terrain here that's going to help us get out. So one of two things will happen. We'll probably either head straight out, which will probably be the safest route, and then follow this valley back out to the east, to the west and to the south, or we can head for this saddle here. So either way, it's going to take us out and to the left. So I'm going to set my exit point as somewhere in this valley here. So I'm going to say basically parallel to the forward line of troops, and this is going to be my exit point. So this is going to be, I was going to call this valley out. And now we've got enough data in here that, and they're correctly configured, that we can start putting our route together. So let's do exactly that. Let's go back to our flight. We've already configured the flight as we want it, but now we're going to start telling it where we want to go. Now let's note here that it's at Batumi, it's a takeoff point for waypoint 0. It's got the airfield elevation at 3,200 feet and a true airspeed of 300. I actually do everything in calibrated airspeed because that's what the Harrier gives me, so I'm going to set that to 300. In fact, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set that to 200 for this first leg, and I'm going to click on value 0 as my first point. Let's do that again. Make sure you hit insert waypoint and do this. Now, why do I do that? The main reason I do that is because it can take a little bit of time to get yourself reconfigured in flight. So you're not going to be coming straight out of here and then going into your cruise speed at low level. So that 200 feet gives me a little bit of wiggle room for that first 7 nautical miles to get configured. So I'm not going to be stressing about getting configured and getting on the move quickly. Alright, so the next point is going to be, we're going to be following this valley up because it seems it's like a pretty obvious feature of terrain to follow. And here I am going to start specifying my cruise speed. So the Harrier, especially with the new engine modelling, is going to be pretty happy at about 360 knots. So like I say, 360 low stress training environment is about what we need for this point. So we've got our CAS set there. The other thing to note is it's currently at 15,000. So we don't want to be traveling at 15,000. We're going to be coming in at low level, so we're going to change that to 500 feet AGL. So we're going to vary a little bit around there, but that's going to be roughly what we're aiming for throughout. Next one is, so I've set this value waypoint 1 as a steer point because it kind of puts us in that direction at the fork, and we can see that we're at another fork here where we'll have an option to go up northeast or head straight out to the east. So I've got this second waypoint defined as plain, and that's going to be my next one. So we're going to add this one at 360 knots as well. And I can imagine that throughout this we're going to be coming in arrow formation, maintaining visual contact, and then we'll make once this terrain starts opening up, then we can start getting into more of a mission set of headspace. So we've got a left turn here, and then we're going to head towards Baghdadi. So we're going to start to want to accelerate at this point. So the next one I'm going to add is going to be a 420 knots, and you notice I'm using multiples of 60 here. So 360, 6 miles a minute, 420, 7 miles a minute. So if the nav kit fails, at least we've got a rough idea of what sort of time we need to be, what sort of speed we need to be maintaining in order to achieve our time on target, if that was a factor for us. Today it's not going to be, so I'm not going to stress about it, but it is a good practice to maintain. Here's our IP, and keep that at 420. You note that by default it does change everything to true airspeed, which is frustrating, but there's not really a huge amount we can do about that. And then we're going to come in for our target at, again, 420 knots and low level. And then we're going to be making a left-hand turn. Now I could add another waypoint out here, but in reality there's going to be a lot going on. We're going to be coming in, cresting over this little saddle, so we're not going to be visual with the target area until probably the last, let's say, 4 miles. So the last thing we want to be doing is cycling through half a dozen waypoints on the way out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the next waypoint as our exit point. and I'm going to allow us a little bit of discretion to use the terrain, understand what the threats are, make sure that we've got time to focus on our target to get out there. And all I know here is I'm going to come in, hit the target, going to egress out on the target heading, and then we're going to make a left-hand turn to get out there and then use the terrain. So that's fine for me. And again, this is going to be 420. And that's us at our exit point. We're then going to be able to head towards Kutaisi and let off the gas a little bit. So when we get to the Kutaisi city, we will maintain low level, but here we can focus on a little bit more training benefits, so making sure that we're covering the fundamentals of tactical navigation as we leave the AO. And then we've chosen the saddle here, and these are all obvious geographic features, so I know from flying in this area a lot that is really clear and obvious, so that's going to be my exit area. I know that city is impossible to miss, and I know that river has got these obvious estuaries and intersections here, and it's directly south of the city. So this is how we're going to get out of the area. And then that's going to take us out to our initials point. Now, for initials, what I've done here is I've just set a point that's roughly on centre line at around 13 miles. And that's just going to give us plenty of time to get squared away and ready for our arrival. So I'm going to check that this one is 360 again. And then add another waypoint here, which is our landing. Now, CombatFlite's smart enough to know that that is an airport, and because we've set the snap to function here. But what we can also do, which we're going to do today, is we're also going to add a second airport. Now you can see this has got a dotted line on it, and this is our alternate or divert field. And again, it knows it's another airfield, it knows that we've already landed, so this is going to record that automatically as our alternate airfield. And that's essentially it. So notwithstanding any tactical considerations, which we can talk about in a different series of videos, that's what we're looking at. Now, there's a lot of work involved in inputting all of these waypoints into the Harrier's nav kit. Some aircraft like the Viggen will allow you to pre-plan these. Personally, I'm pretty used to hitting these into the upfront controller, so we can get it done pretty quickly. But if you don't want to do it, you can fly this by just putting your key waypoints in. So for example, I might only want to put plane, my IP, my target, and then perhaps the saddle, for example, and that would be enough to get me in and out if I didn't want to spend time putting in 12 or 13 waypoints. Right, so I'm going to hit pause here for a minute, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of the output functions that we can use with CombatFlite.